Well, Islamabad is embracing heavy security measures for peace talks between the US and Iran scheduled for Saturday. US Vice President JD Vance is on his way to Pakistan now and has warned Iran against trying to play the US. Let's bring in our two guests to unpack this. Rina Shah is a political advisor and joins us from Washington DC. Welcome. And Setareh Sadeqi is an assistant professor at the University of Tehran's Faculty of World Studies, and she joins us from Isfahan. Welcome to you. Setareh, I just want to start with you. JD Vance has said that Iran may be trying to play the US. What exactly is Iran's endgame with the US?
Well, Iran is not trying to play the US. The US has proven previously that they do not respect any international laws or international deals with any country, including Iran. The US and Israel bombed Iran 2 times during negotiations back in June and then again in February. The war that went on for plus 40 days until the US started sending messages through different countries and asking Iran to come to negotiation table. And Iran made it clear that they will not negotiate at gunpoint. There will the US sends their proposal, and Iran said the only way for Iran to come to talk with the US for a ceasefire is for the United States to accept Iran's 10-point framework, and which included, and by the way, this was posted by Trump himself and then confirmed by the Pakistani Prime Minister, that the ceasefire or stopping attacks on Lebanon should be a condition met by the United States and Israel if they want Iran to engage in these talks. And the second one has been the releasing of Iran's frozen assets that the U.S. had illegally frozen for many years in Qatari and South Korean banks. And by the way, the reports that the U.S. has already authorized the release of these funds. So it seems like the U.S. does want to go ahead, but there is no trust from the Iranian side, and we're just seeing it as a very fragile ceasefire that could be broken at any time, but we will give it a shot.
Rina, what do you feel is the US's endgame with Iran?
Look, the U.S. endgame isn't just buying time or kicking the can down the road. It is smart, targeted de-escalation from a position of strength. I think after the recent fighting, Washington wants verifiable limits on Iran's nuclear program so that it never gets a bomb. They also want a fully open Strait of Hormuz for global energy flows and real curbs on Tehran's support for proxies that destabilize the region. I don't think this is vague diplomacy for its own sake. It's using the 2-week ceasefire window and American leverage to get concrete concessions instead of the broken promises that we have seen before. I mean, the goal here, if I'm looking at this holistically, I believe from the American sense, is lasting stability without another endless entanglement. And what that is pragmatic realism, not wishful thinking.
Setareh, I want to go back to you with regards to Lebanon. You mentioned that earlier. How do you think the situation in Lebanon is going to play out in these talks? It's such a crucial element right now.
Well, even though Israel has more than 2,000 times breached any ceasefire deals, and Iran knows that Israel has no respect for ceasefire deals, this time Iran is engaging in talks with the United States, and they have made it clear that this is an integral part of the 10-point framework, and they're not going to negotiate with the United States if that does not stop. And there are reports that Israel has been pushed into accepting it. But as I said, because it's impossible to trust both the U.S. regime and the Zionist regime in respecting ceasefire deals, it's difficult to predict what is going to happen. But for the Iranian side, as they have the leverage over the Strait of Hormuz and they have the upper hand, and they have been starting to exercise their leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, they have made it clear that if you do not accept that as a precondition, then then the negotiations are not even going to happen. And Iran feels that it's very likely that the war will resume, and Iran will just continue defending itself and exercising its right to self-defense. But it's also important to understand that the colonial framing of these indigenous resistant movements, including Hezbollah and other groups in the region that have risen up because of the existence of a settler colonial project that is occupying Palestine and has been engaged in genocide and ethnic cleansing of the nations in the region. They have risen to defend their sovereignty. Without Hezbollah and resistant elements within the Lebanese government, probably Lebanon would not exist today, because we all know about the expansive policy of the Israeli regime that wants to expand even until to Turkey, to the borders with Turkey, and they have clearly even threatened Turkey as being a target for their assassination attempts. So what we're seeing is Iran exercising its leverage and making it clear that negotiations will happen only if Iran's terms are accepted and fulfilled. And maybe the U.S. wants to throw Israel under the bus at this point, but we know how the AIPAC and the Israeli lobby have influenced America's policy, and this is something that Iranian officials are very well aware of.
Rina, what do you think on this?
Yeah, to me, the Lebanon piece is the real wild card here, and it could make or break momentum in those peace talks in Islamabad. Israel has been crystal clear. Their operations against Hezbollah are not part of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire. Meanwhile, Tehran is pushing hard to fold Lebanon into any bigger deal. They see its proxy network as inseparable from its own security. So expect it to surface as leverage, maybe quiet talks on arms flows, or a parallel track for Lebanese ceasefire and disarmament, which Netanyahu just opened the door to. But if both sides get pragmatic, it could unlock broader progress. And I think that's important. If positions stay rigid, it risks stalling everything. The bottom line here is that the region is highly interconnected, but these talks are bilateral, and decoupling the issues might be the adult move here.
Setareh, what if these talks in Pakistan fail?
Well, Iran will continue fighting back and exercising its right to self-defense. There are, by the way, no proxies. I keep hearing this colonial framing of the resistant movements inside the region. The Hezbollah has been a political party within the Lebanese political system, and they have been defending Lebanese territories against Israeli invasions for a very long time. And Iran's support for Hezbollah is not only for a military group or political party, but for the sovereignty of the country, as well as standing against a settler colonial project that has been inflicting chaos on all the nations in the region, basically. And let's also not forget that the Zionist regime is the only regime and political entity in the region that has nuclear weapons, and it has the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the region. Iran's peaceful nuclear program, has been verified as peaceful for decades by international agencies, and these excuses of nuclear weapons have always been used to try to make Iran to surrender to the imperialist powers' aggression and stop resisting U.S. intervention in the country. So if the U.S. does not accept Iran's terms, we're just going to go back to where we were. Iran fighting against the imperialist aggression effectively and exercising its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, has made it possible for Iran to sell more oils and at a higher price, and basically and effectively reversing the decades of sanctions against the country.
Rina, I want to go to you on the issue of trust. Do you think there's trust left between Washington and Tehran?
I think it's almost nil at this point. And I think if I can take a point of almost personal privilege here as a brown skinned American woman who is a new American, I was the daughter of immigrants. I understand the concepts of colonialism and imperialism. But most of us Americans are pretty aghast at a regime that kills their own. Thousands of Iranians have been killed by their own government in the streets for doing what? Lifting their voices? So to make Washington out to be the bad actor here, I get it. It's an easy thing to do. But on a personal point, I take great offense to that. I think the Iranian people should be free of a murderous regime. And trust, I think it's, look, every day it waxes and wanes. I think right now, peace is what all of us want. And I think peace should be the priority. I think when I look at why President Trump is sending JD Vance, his vice president, I think he's sending him because it sends exactly the right signal to Iran that this is a top tier priority. We want peace. And he's going to try to handle these talks, I think, JD Vance, with real authority and a track record of, whether you like him or not, straight talking realism. Vance has been openly skeptical of open-ended foreign wars, which I and many Americans have been as well. And so that gives him actual credibility when he says we're extending an open hand, but don't play us. Plus, the Iranian side has reportedly seen Vance as more approachable than, say, American career diplomats after the earlier Geneva rounds. And so I, for one, am cheerleading high-level, pragmatic diplomacy here. And I think it's serious enough to show we're committed, but grounded in America first priorities, no lies, no fluff, just results.
Setareh, is there any trust left between Washington and Tehran right now?
Not at all. And I think of what I'm hearing resembles brown sahibs that have always formed the narrative on behalf of their masters. I mean, as an American, Rina should be very well aware of what ICE has done to not only Black community and brown community, but also members of the white community and immigrants, and from a regime that has been engaged in terrorism against not only its own citizens, but across the so-called Middle East and across the world. The U.S. is in no moral position to tell other countries how they're treating their peoples, putting aside the fact that those fabricated numbers that have never been verified by any international entity, and they were actually made up by a originally Indian fashion blogger and then a shady doctor in Germany, and as I said, never verified and always inflated and multiple times, were used in order to dehumanize a nation, delegitimize a political system chosen by the people, and then use them as a justification for a massive invasion of the country. The same playbook that we saw in effect through the invasion of Libya, invasion of Afghanistan, invasion of Iraq, and other countries. So I think Iran has every right not to trust the United States and has every right to exercise its right to self-defense. And Iran's internal issues are none of U.S. business or the imperialist powers' business, and Iran knows how to handle the country.
Rina, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I want to focus on the talks here because so many things can be debated, right? Sources, data, freedom fighters like Masih Alinejad, a friend of mine who can tell you exactly what the truth is about Iran. And look, for whatever it's worth, America's an imperfect nation. We get it wrong every day of the week, but it's still the greatest nation on the planet. We have freedoms here and we have justice here, something that the Iranian people, I don't think, are able to experience under the IRGC. But yeah, I mean, moral high ground can be debated all day long. But again, the end goal here is peace. And so I want these talks to succeed. If these talks fail, we slide right back into escalation and fast. And I am worried about that. The ceasefire is already fragile. Collapse means resume strike. Tighter sanctions that could crater Iran's economy. I care about that too. I want the people of Iran to be free and prosperous. I want everybody around the world to be free and prosperous. And I also want there not to be higher oil prices that hit everyone because we all need that oil. So look, neither side wants a full-blown wider war. I don't think that that's the case here. But without serious offers from Tehran, the US and its partners have the tools and the leverage to make consequences real. I think the upside here is the mutual interest in avoiding that outcome is exactly why we're talking now. Failure is not inevitable, but it would remind everyone why strength and clarity matter more than ever in this region.
Rina, you say failure is not inevitable. What if these talks fail? That question to you, Setareh.
Well, I'm happy Rina mentioned that she's a good friend of Masih Ali-Najad, a native informant and a CIA contractor who has pushed the worst imperialist narratives against the Iranian people, and she's hated by most Iranians inside Iran. But as I said, if the talks fail, we're going to go back to square one, which is Iran exercising its rights to self-defense and protecting its sovereignty against U.S. imperialist aggression and the Zionist regime's aggression against the country, which, by the way, have been going on for a very long time. And Iran has effectively shown the world that an independent nation that has been under decades of sanctions still can vigorously and effectively fight back imperialism and bring down the so-called invincible, most powerful army of the world to its needs and to make it big for a ceasefire.
Rina, I just want you to respond to that, and also the question: if these talks fail, what happens?
I mean, it's just, again, back into endless escalation. That is the only thing that's here. This is almost turned into a black and white issue. But I can tell you here stateside, nobody wants this. No American wants this. We didn't want it on the night of the strikes. We know we went in tandem with Israel. That doesn't sit well with a lot of Americans. We are, as a country, grappling with what it means to be abroad, to be trying to nation build abroad. It's not perfect. These are not answers that we can find somewhere. We can't even look at history fully to find the answer. We have to rely on, again, moral clarity, leadership that is trying to put people first over power. I'm not somebody that expected to say this, but I think Vice President Vance has a real moment in which he can step up and show the American people that he deserves the role of vice president and potentially even president.
Rina, we'll leave it there. Thank you to both of you. Rina Shah, thank you so much for speaking to us, and Setareh Sadeqi. Ladies, thank you very much for your insights, your time here on TRT World's NewsHour. Thank you.